Hello, everyone. Welcome to Startup Grind, Grand Rapids, and Lansing's co-promoted event, The Dark Side of Crushing It, with three times founder Ryan Vaughn. And Startup Grind, just a quick little intro. We are the globe's largest network of tech entrepreneurs. We have about 3.5 million people as members, and about 5.5 million people interact with the brand annually through our global regional conferences, our monthly events like this one, hosted by local chapters, podcasts, and all the things. Very easy to get plugged in. We operate with a mission to inspire, educate, and connect, and with three values, and that is, let's see if I can remember them. Give first before you take, help others before you help yourselves, and the last one is make friends, not contacts. And sometimes it sounds a little corny, but sometimes these networking things can be a little transactional, and we're actually here to make relationships. So we find that building those relationships actually is more beneficial in the long run. So with that, want to give people on the in the group here to give an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us what they're doing. Stephanie, you're with us here at Startup Grand Rapids. So how about a quick little intro?
Absolutely. I love Startup Grand Rapids. It's been a pleasure to work with Corey and team. I am the founder of Grow Business Today. We're a full service growth company. We handle marketing and advertising, and your growth is our business. So working with companies from startups to mid-sized $3 to $5 million of looking to scale and align resources, mentors, funding, and opportunities for them to do that. And my heart passion, 2 years ago, I founded a nonprofit called Projects for Purpose. I am a big believer in empowering the next generation of creators and entrepreneurs. And during that process, with COVID, one of the projects that we worked on with a very talented group of people, Mallowfield LLC, Kent County Essential Needs Task Force, Alma International, ISI Consulting, and 2-in-1 in West Michigan, was we were tasked to say, okay, with food distribution sites not accessible and so many different diverse communities that need to get the message, how can we create a platform in a very short period of time, like now, within 7 days, that users can access and find on demand as they change where food is available. And so proud of the team that came together for this project. We were able to launch it in 7 days, and within 24 hours had 4,300 Kent County residents access the site and were able to eat. Which is beautiful and wonderful. And it just proves, again, the power of social impact and great teams like on the call today coming together to do good. So a little bit about me, and happy to be here.
Well, yeah, it was great getting introduced to you when I was starting the chapter last year, and then you also had an opportunity to go to Startup Grind Global with us. And so
amazing.
Looking forward to this year's Global, which will be virtual. And then anyone listening here who wants to get a discount code for attending, just let myself or Ruben know, and we'll get you tickets. And on that, Ruben, you are the new Lansing Startup Grind chapter director. Maybe a little quick intro on you.
Yeah, happy to be here. I came in contact with the Startup Grind community last year as a guest and speaker at the Lansing Startup Grind, and became more aware of their community presence and what they were building locally, nationally, globally, and I'm very excited to be the new director here. I guess I can't keep saying new. It was like last October, but it's nice to say new because then I don't have to catch up to what Corey's doing yet if I keep saying I'm new. But a team and I here in Lansing are making some good progress. We've got some great new sponsors and partners joining in, and we're building the community here for Startup Grind Lansing. I also run a small venture company. We work with early stage companies, funding, and more importantly, getting involved in building businesses to scale with these early stage founders and teams.
What's the web address, or how do people find out about that?
Washington Avenue Ventures is our company. It's wa.ventures. Very simple website.
Keep it simple. I love it. All right, and Sloth.
Hey everybody, my name is Sloth with Slothworks. I'm a custom web and mobile application developer here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, focusing on startups and entrepreneurs, nonprofits and small businesses. I tend to shamelessly promote community-oriented things at Startup Grind, and today will be no different. Code for Good West Michigan is reactivating here in 2021, and I'm super excited to see them come back. They're an organization that puts together crack teams of creatives to help nonprofits in West Michigan create oftentimes technological solutions for problems. So they're looking for volunteers, whether they are developers or designers or marketing people or copywriters. We need all those types of skills. So that's codeforgoodwm.org. And that's it. That's it for me. If we're doing popcorn, where are we going to?
Yeah, right.
We doing? We have Laura's like.
Unfortunately, none of these little cabanas fit like more than like 4 people that I can find. Anyway, and Laura, do you want to talk about a little bit about you?
Yeah, I'm Laura. I'm downstairs in our house, and Ryan is directly in that room up there. So hopefully you won't have any sound feedback issues. But I have a business that I've run for a few years now called Blackbird RSVP, and we have an online platform that event organizers can use to create landing pages for their events to collect RSVPs or sell tickets. I think I still have a business with, there are no events, just in case anyone was wondering. We made the shift to kind of virtual events. Some of those have RSVP pages, and some of the people use the platforms for that. So sort of figuring out like how long are we going to wait this out, but trying to kind of explore some other things creatively, because that was kind of my outlet, to build something that I enjoyed creatively. So that's where I'm at. I'm hoping that within the next year, things start to pick up a bit.
Well, and they certainly will. Like things have picked up in different sectors. Clearly, some sectors are busier than others at the moment, and the opportunities for global growth and partnership across regions is really incredible. So that's stuff that we get to see day in and day out at Startup Grind. I know everyone, when they're in their silos and local, sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel like that, because especially when we're not going out very much, all we see is right to the end of the block, right? It's like, so with all that, thank you for the introductions, really appreciate it. And now we can get to our special guest, Ryan. Maybe just a quick little intro about you and your background, and then we can get into the topic of discussion.
Yeah, no, thank you. Ryan Vaughn, founder of Inside Out Leadership. We're a leadership development agency that works with high performance entrepreneurs to develop into extraordinary leaders. And it's funny, I was thinking as we were getting ready for this talk, I remembered that I think it's been like 6 or 7 years ago, Laura and I had went to a Startup Grind Kalamazoo and did this talk around where we were at that stage in our life. And I just pulled it up, and it's quite stark to watch yourself from 7 years ago try to talk about all the things that you think you know. So I think what I was left with was this very real sense that I think I know less now than I did 7 years ago, with a couple companies under my belt and everything else. So, but really glad to be here. It's fun to have a conversation with you guys, and I also got a sense of the scope and the impact that Startup Grind can bring, just through the process. Like since we talked, Corey, to where we are right now, I had a chance to talk with some people from Berlin, in the Startup Grind Berlin chapter, about some stuff that they're doing there that's very similar and like thematically to the things that you guys are working on here. So very, very cool to be able to plug into a network like that. And I hope that we can have an interesting conversation for folks.
Yeah, to that end, on the global impact, I know that the Zurich chapter director is really excited about sharing this talk with his community, as well as the entire group of chapters in Pakistan are really excited about this. And they have a network of like 20 chapters. Time zones, what they are. they're not attending live. But entrepreneurism in some of these emerging markets, sometimes fairly mature markets in their own right, this topic of crushing it, right? They're all reading and posting pictures of the book entitled "Crushing It," and so there's certainly some romanticism around this whole startup life, and I really appreciate your personal openness and candor about some of the personal effects of that, because success is more than just bottom line and exits, right? What good is it if you are surrounded by detritus, divorce, and whatever else? So let's get into it. The name of the talk is The Dark Side of Crushing It, and I'll let you sort of maybe take it away.
Yeah, sure. So when I was thinking about sort of my last 15 years of experience, so I've been in venture-backed startups for about 15 years. I started 3 companies, the most recent of which is before the one that I run now, was called VNN, and we built it as ESPN.com for high schools. And over a period of about 10 years in that role, I raised $21 million, built a team of 100 people spread all across the country before remote was cool. We went through an M&A process, bought a few companies, partnered with a whole ton of companies. And by the time I left, we controlled about 20% of the US high school market. And that's how we thought of market penetration. So, compared to all of my sort of, reasonable expectations for what success could look like, I feel like I reached it many times over. Compared to my first ever investor deck, where I said that we would get to, I think I said like 75% market penetration with 250 grand. It worked out very differently from that, but it was a really, really formative experience for me, where I had a chance to, just go through so many different kind of quote unquote successful stages, where we went from the startup stage to the growth stage to the M&A stage. We did all these things, and I sort of through that process had the experience of appreciating those things, working my ass off, and the team working our ass off to accomplish those. But I ran into this tension, and the tension was between, I felt like I had, as the leader of the organization, as somebody who has to recruit and has to raise money and has to sort of sell the world on the company, I felt like I always had to be presenting the best version of the company in all these, in every area that I was. And so I had these little anecdotes that I would be ready with. So I'd sort of like think about our, the success that we've had or the different milestones that we were working on. And I would just have them at the ready for each person that I talked to, so that I could, give a really effective elevator pitch. And that's, one example, but I really took the sales process of how the company was working seriously. And I think it did a lot for us. It helped catalyze our growth from a fundraising perspective, recruiting perspective, and all these things. But it also led to some really challenging business problems that I wasn't at all prepared for when I was growing the company. So it became a catch-22, and the downside of it almost killed our company over a period of about 2 years between 2014 and 2016, which is where, sort of this up and to the right, process of crushing it and continuing success started to implode, and all of a sudden took us to some pretty dark times. So I think there's an entirely maybe, related conversation about, the detritus that a crazy focus on business can leave around all the other areas of your life. But I also think that very practically, just in terms of the efficacy of running a business as a leader, crushing it can cause some serious harm. So I wasn't aware of that going into it. And it was something that is one of those things where I wish somebody would have told me, and I probably would have at least gone in eyes wide open.
That's really great feedback. And I feel you on that. Like I I think as founders and working with founders and yourself, I remember walking into your office and being so impressed. You had the best elevator pitch. You always were prepared, your documents, no matter who I brought in the office, you connected right away. Something that our business, learning from others like yourself, is trying to really be intentional about, is looking at that 10x, 100x approach, is in the dream and the vision of getting to the growth. Are we aligned operationally, culturally, and with the right talent in place to, once we get there, not have an impact of explosion where we have to take 20 steps back the hard way. Also in the technology world, I'm not a tech person. I'm a connector person. You're a tech person. You get hot in the mechanics behind it. So how to build and trust a team and bring a team together that has all of those awesome talents and knows their lanes and can create really awesome things, right, together, has been part of a struggle for me. So I echo and hear what you're saying. And I'm glad that you were vulnerable to say that, because I think that's hard for people getting started to say, to acknowledge, until you get to the end where you look back and you're like, holy crap. I wish I would have got real, man. Like 5 years in, I wish I would have got real for a minute with my team and my crew and my people that I could count on, and be like, I'm kind of struggling right now. Like, things are kind of exploding. What do I do? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a sense that, and I, you know, and a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with now, both in groups and personally, I get a sense that there's an expectation that we always have our shit together, and we always know where we're going. We always, you know, we always have a plan. It's always a rocket ship. It's always going to the moon, and the missing piece is always very clearly articulated. And you just so happen to be able to bring that missing piece. And like that's not real, right? That might be an effective sales pitch, but it's not the reality of the company. So as effective as it can be, you know, it can cause some serious issues. So I remember around that time, you know, 2014 to 16, we scaled. In 2014, we raised our first venture round for VNN, and we scaled from 14 people to 75 people in about 9 months. And just the whole thing just was a shit show. It turned into like a whole bunch of very, very talented, very, very committed people, who I think the way that I approached leadership sort of set them up to, you know, be at odds with one another and not be as successful as they could be. You know, one example of that is, I think that like when I went out and I, you know, I would be pitching the company to everybody, and I would recruit people very, you know, aggressively, because I wanted to build the best team. And I would have this image of here's the best version of the company, and here's where we're going. And it's always up and to the right, and it's always crushing it. And what that did is that created a space inside our company where everybody would look at me and they would see, yeah, Ryan's crushing it. He tells us all how much we're crushing it. So clearly this company is amazing. I'm so glad to work here. And yet, as I look at the work that I'm doing, it's kind of gross and messy, and it's certainly not crushing it. And so as you think about like, you know, the role of people in a high growth company, a big chunk of what they're tasked to do, a big chunk of what makes them successful is innovation. And in order to innovate, somebody in any company has to be willing to look stupid, right? You have to be willing to take the risks of putting your work out there and it not working. But in an environment where the entire company and everybody in it, everything you look at, they're all doing great, everything's working, it makes that really, really hard. And so like my approach of this up and to the right, you know, everything's going to the moon sort of sales approach to growing the company worked in the context of fundraising, but actually made it harder for our team to take the risks necessary to innovate, because they're just human. They're going through this messy process. And, you know, in hindsight, as I look back at it, being real about when things are going well, hell yeah, let's lean into this. But when things are a mess, just calling it a mess, not trying to spin it into like how it's going to be good in the end, would have made it a hell of a lot easier for, you know, the people who are responsible for actually doing the work to be effective at it.
So this level of this hindsight and the perspective, and then now being able to help others and encourage them to be vulnerable. This is what's born out in Inside Out Leadership. Is that what created your next adventure here?
Yeah, I mean, I think in large part it was due to that. I think for most of my startup career, the thing I was most interested in was just growth and winning, and just finding a way to take over a market, make a dent in the universe, be all I can be. There's so many different sort of cultural touchstones that we have in America, certainly, but also around the world, around the importance of quote unquote success, the way that society defines it. And I think my startup career was very much driving toward that vision of success. And there were some rocky times, and I think my approach to leadership early on led to some of those rocky times, as I was mentioning. But overall, I feel really pleased with the work that we were able to do at VNN, and they're still in a position where I'm knocking on a bunch of wood that they're gonna complete the initiatives that they're working on now to take over the market. And I think that's a real possibility, which would be great. But from my perspective, I got to a point where it was clear to me that winning the game just wasn't as interesting as it used to be anymore. It's like I had gotten enough gold stars to not care about getting the next gold star. And that was like, for somebody who had devoted their entire life for 15 years to getting gold stars, that was friggin' disruptive. That was a really big deal to realize that, oh man, if I hit this next milestone or this next thing, it's not going to change anything the way that I used to think it would. So for me, that was there was a need for a lot of adjustments to sort of reconcile with the fact that, what I was interested in was much more in terms of like being useful as opposed to winning a game. And so, sort of a 6-month process near the end of last year, beginning of this year, to transition from, sort of the hard charging Alexandrian leader with a sword in the front of everybody that I had been for a long time, into, a role of supporting leaders as they go through their own journey, many of whom are very interested in winning the game. And I think that's awesome. And many of whom are trying to figure out, okay, so once I'm successful, then what? And I think that's like, it's questions like that when approached right, can be integrated into the organization, can be integrated into your business, and your business can become like the most powerful paintbrush for the artistry of your life. Or they can lead to huge changes if you don't think about them, and then all of a sudden they slap you in the face. Then you end up buying a fancy car and going off into the woods and taking drugs and all sorts of crazy stuff to figure that out.
Ryan, did you find in the process of always getting to the next goal and that next gold star, when you were in that lane, when you were in that focal point, and I'm glad Laura, your wife's on the call today too, did you find it challenging to live in the present and the gratitude of the present from a personal space? And can you talk to that a little bit? Because I think that's something I hear from a lot of all of us who are starting businesses, and especially, VC minded tech startups. It's like you're on that go. Can you talk about your experience with that?
Sure. Yeah. Living in the present. It honestly, when I first started my career, it wasn't even on my radar. It was, I was so interested in just being somebody that it wasn't even a thing. But I picked up a meditation habit about a decade ago. And originally that was the intention of meditation, was just to sort of like recognize that I'm crazy stressed and I need to like try to take some sort of action to, not feel like I'm going to die all the time. And so meditation started as that, but over time it really became a vehicle that gave me a lot of appreciation for what it means to live in the present. And I think, part of the paradigm of running, particularly a venture-backed company, is that you're always looking into the future, and you're always looking into the future with a very specific lens. You're looking at it through the lens of like creation and management and control. So from my perspective, it was like, I have this 5-year plan, this 5-year projection. which I have sold everybody on this being what's going to happen. And now, like, the number one most important thing, the thing my life and the life of my company and all these people's jobs depend on, is my being able to force reality to conform to that projection. And that is, like, A, impossible, and B, a hell of a weight to put on yourself. And it's a weight that for me drew me out of the present constantly all the time, because I had so much at stake in the future being something that I could control, which is kind of a non-starter in the in the beginning. And I think, as I have sort of gained some context on it over the past couple of years, and transitioned into leadership development, where questions like this are a big part of what I do on a daily basis, I've found that there's kind of two different approaches to this conversation. There's, I'm full on aggressively creating, which is, I think, what stereotypically America is known for, right? We're very much forward looking and creation. And then there's this very different approach, which is like, I am completely content and present in the moment, and I want for nothing. Like, I want what I have. I think, like, the Stoics and the Buddhists and these types of people, have been espousing the virtues of that sort of life for a long time. And I've been in both. I as part of my journey away from Vienna, I stayed at a monastery for a little bit to try to, figure stuff out. And so I've kind of experienced both sides of that pendulum. And what I've found is that, like, part of living in the present for me, and I would presume for a lot of leaders, given the fact that, of what we're up to and the creation that we're up to, has to hold both, right? It can't be, I'm going to give up the things that I want in order to be present, because part of being present is being present to what I want, right? So there's an approach that I have to work on all the time, and I have to sort of keep present for myself, which is to, be really clear about what I'm up to and what I'm creating in the world, but not be attached to it looking a particular way, and not get focused on the difference between me not having it now and some future in which I will have it. Instead, what it looks like a lot for me, in the way that I'm able to stick in the present, is enjoying the tension between, what I want and where I am. So the tension sometimes can feel uncomfortable, but I've learned to sort of lean into it, lean into the sharp points, and just treat that as part of what's present for me right now.
Beautifully said.
Ruben, on this topic here, so you have experience in helping multiple companies at the same time grow and scale, and you have certain demands of your founders that you're entrusting to do just that, because you expect a return, right, at the end of the day, for those that you've promised a return for. On that side of this whole conversation, what are your thoughts on developing leaders and making sure that they are crushing it in the right way?
It's a topic I think we could all go on forever on. And Ryan, everything you're saying, I was just putting in the chat how much I can relate. I think the reason that I'm so passionate about working with young founders is to help them not make the mistakes I made in the dark side of crushing it, and literally having those conversations daily with founders I'm working with. And I've got some great examples recently I'm proud of, like a founder who I could see was going down the track that I did in my 20s and 30s, burning everybody out around him, burning himself out. I did all that, and so I can recognize it quickly. And so I challenged him just before the holidays. I noticed that not only was he kind of frustrating everybody around him and his team, but I noticed that he was, it usually comes from a core like unhappiness that you're creating in yourself, and I could see it in him. And I just challenged him to get outside, like go for a walk every day, take some meetings you can do Zoom meetings on the river trail, and go for a walk. And he's an extremist, so anything I challenge him to, he took it to an extreme. And now he got us all on a step competition, and he's out on the river trail half the day doing, and he lost like 30 pounds in 2 months, and now he's gone the other way. So I'm like, okay, now back that down. Now I gotta get focused on that. Now he's burning himself out physically instead of mentally. but yeah, Corey, I really enjoy that side now because I've made all the mistakes and I've burned my teams out. I've burned my family out, and had to stop and realize that I wasn't developing leaders. I was leading, but I wasn't developing leaders. And I'd love to hear more about the Inside Out leadership, because we've actually just launched a program called Integrated Coaching that's helping people identify, or I would say understand, their unique identity, and then how they express that in the workplace, versus just grinding, no pun intended. But one of the reasons I'm interested in being part of Startup Grind is to kind of take that. I would say that there's a lot of stigma about being proud that I'm a grinder, and I'm trying to help people understand, these young founders especially, what a healthy grind looks like. So yeah, definitely enjoy the conversation.
Yeah,
I
right.
love
Tell
that.
us a little bit more about the Inside Out leadership and your approach. What makes the founders you're working with, what's making the impact? Maybe some, if you, without of course violating any kind of confidentiality, but maybe you can talk about some of the experiences that people are benefiting from.
Yeah, and happy to. Being also sensitive to the topic of the conversation too. But I think what I find in working with leaders is that there's a lot of sort of whether it's culturally or from some other place, inherited sense of purpose. Like there's a sense that and sometimes, to Ruben's point, it's driven from fear, or like this internal sense of not enoughness or something like this that they're trying to run away from. That was what it was for me. But oftentimes, like the question of purpose for leaders is, from the company perspective, like they've done the work to put together a mission statement, but for their own perspective, I'll ask a question like, what does success look like for you? And it's like deer in the headlights. I don't know what, where I'm going apart from this company being successful. And so, I think a good chunk of the work that I end up doing with leaders is getting really clear about where they're going as a life, as opposed to as just a company. And then the company fits, within that life and supports the life, and is one of the most powerful, tools for self-expression that there is. But it's really easy to flip-flop those two things and to think that the company is the thing that matters and I am, in service to it. Whereas I think, in effective leadership, I think is when those two things can become aligned. So that's a good chunk of it. And then I think a lot of the other part, once purpose is sort of very clear for somebody, a lot of the other part is dealing with fear. And I think there's there's a stat that I read earlier today that said 65%, this is legit, 65% of new startups fail because of co-founder conflict. And that's just obscene. But like, we call it co-founder conflict, or we call it bad board management, or we call it any number of different things. But really what it comes down to more often than not is people are scared. And, because we have this really unhealthy relationship with fear in America, we tend to like think of it as taboo, and we shouldn't talk about it, and we shouldn't like admit that we feel it. We end up just like leaving it unexamined, and then it causes crazy havoc in our companies. And I think of it like, like competition, say, you think about like the importance of putting a microscope on what your competition's doing, so that, like, you don't like to have competition. It'd be great if none of it existed, so you would just have the most success that's possible in the world. But it's real, and it's smart to get, wise on what your competition is doing, so you can make good decisions. Same thing with fear. It's real. It drives a hell of a lot more of the decisions than we expect that it does, but we don't want to look at it. And so I think there's a hell of a lot of knowledge and growth that can come from just, taking a critical look at it in terms of how we interact with it, and being conscientious with that. So that's a good chunk of what we do as well. And, there's no 12-step plan to being an incredible leader. So it's not like I have a process that people go through. It's very tailored to their own journey and what they're up to. But those are two key elements for sure.
Yeah, we at Startup Grind, we have a lot of early entrepreneurs coming in, right? And then we have a lot of seasoned folks too. And through this journey, our story arc, everything really seems like very like immediate to us, right? And then we always like to say, as practitioners and helpers, is like, well, you know, your experience, while it is your own, it's not unique. However, it is unique, right? So like what, it's not a one size fits all. I can't say, you know, like, oh, your deck needs to look like this, or like you need to like, yeah. So um uh is this just like personally, like how is this pivot to helping others for you? Is it filling you up like you expected?
Yeah, yeah. I sort of like, sometimes I feel like I'm doing such good work and helping people to you know, to overcome barriers that have been big deals for them and grow their companies, and get to set, like, I earlier today I celebrated a big win with a client, which is really awesome. And then sometimes I feel like I'm incredibly over my head, and there's like so much I have to learn, and I feel like, you know, on balance, that's probably a pretty good place to be and a pretty good place to stay. So, you know, the thing I think I've learned about myself is, at least for this chapter in my career, I'm much more interested in being useful, and helping people to, you know, do things that are important to them and to the world, than I am in getting a unicorn or anything like that. So, you know, so that's sort of, you know, all the work that I do now, whether it's that, whether it's, you know, group work. I'm working with a Silicon Valley group that's going to be putting out something big pretty soon, or the you know, the writing and content production I do. It's all really around, you know, trying to be useful to those people, those crazy creators who are giving of themselves to build things in the world.
And it's not just unicorn builders that you're working with, right? Like you're not working with people who are struggling through scaling from the 12 to 112.
Yeah.
You've got a book club as well, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's all sorts of cool experiments. A book club. I taught meditation to business leaders for some time. Like, there's a lot of different ways of bringing community together around leadership that I think are useful. Um, but ultimately, like, there is a really significant challenge that a lot of creators will run into, when they go from, you know, sort of the initial stage of hustling and selling and, you know, doing all the things that are necessary to get something off the ground, to scaling a team and leadership. And I think it's that transition that was, you know, both incredibly rewarding and incredibly challenging to me. And it's that transition that, you know, a lot of my work plays into right now. Another good example is like of the crushing it concept is, when you're on your own or when you're with a really small team, you make decisions based on what you see, based on the reality as you interpret it. And you got to move so fast and you got to hustle so much that that's as much as that's, you know, that's all that's necessary. But once you get a team, there's an opportunity to see reality from multiple perspectives, and based on seeing reality from multiple perspectives, make better decisions. Jack Welch talks about whoever sees, or the team that sees reality the best wins.
Mhm.
And that's a really big paradigm shift, to go from, I know the answer, I need everybody else to do it, to, I don't know the answer, I need you guys to help me see it. And I think it's like, and there's a lot of fear tied up in that. There's a lot of ego tied up in that. And, you know, when I do my job right, I can help people to see that that's the problem that they're running into, so that they can approach it consciously.
I have an ask, and I've gotten this question from others. Like, so we have a lot of pitch competitions, and they're wonderful exposure. You learn so much. You see the best of the best, though, right? To your point from earlier, right? You don't see the decks from the starting point. You see the decks that have been worked on, cultivated, helped along the way. And now they're going for some dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be beautiful if we flipped that and we had founders like yourself who would get up and do their pitch from the first year of, this was my initial starting deck, and this is how I positioned the company, to your mid to the end. So people who are at every step in that process can visually and, you know, intentionally see this. So they don't feel like, I can't do this. Because I've heard, I've had to challenge myself, right? It's like, whoa, they got their shit, they know it all, right? Like this presentation, they've got everything covered. I don't even know where to start, right? It'd be kind of cool to have, like, what would we call that? But to be able to have founders like yourself to share that and do a 10-minute thing where beginning, middle, and end type
I feel like
format.
that would be remarkable. That would be
Yeah.
really, really impactful for people. Yeah, sometimes I have actually showed people, if we're talking about like investor work is definitely something that a lot of entrepreneurs do. And I've showed like, you know, various versions of non-sensitive, you know, deck materials from back in the day, and I get even embarrassed by looking at them. And so like I don't mind going up and being embarrassed on stage. That's fine. But I think like making that normal, making like, hey, your first deck's going to be trash. And that's cool. That's like what success looks like in the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that would be, you know, that it's stuff like that. It's conversations like that, as opposed to, you know, the glitz and glamour of startup porn that,
Yeah.
that I think is what's actually going to help people to get more done and to see more success. It's a good idea.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We can definitely incorporate that into our fireside chats when we bring on founders. We can warn them ahead of time, tell them to be prepared with yeah, bring your worst deck, bring your worst
Yeah.
bring that Polaroid of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when you really thought you were there to get that
Yeah.
get the papers. Sloth, I want to ask you. You work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you put out so much of your heart. A lot of times you're sitting with people, and you even pay for the coffee, right? You don't even get free coffee out of a lot of the consulting that you do. How much are you helping people, or are you paying attention to this, like the health of the founder, or because you're seeing them like as they're getting started, you know, like they're not even, engines aren't even firing yet, right? I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes, right? The health of the founder, that's a great question. You know,
like, do you give them Ryan's information? Be like, open this.
I should, but then I don't know. I might be, you know, what is it? What's the term? The kettle calling, what is it? The pot calling the kettle black or whatever have you? Because like, you know, it's difficult. It would be difficult for me to say, you need to get out, you know, outside and go on walks. And then they're like, I saw a LinkedIn post from you, Sloth, this morning that mentioned that you don't do that, you know. No, it's, I think often when I'm sitting down with, you know, early startups and entrepreneurs, it's really, I just try to go really high level and, you know, just say, because again, I mentioned this in the chat, like I love working collaboratively with people, Ryan, to your point, because, you know, I might maybe know like 60% of the things if I'm lucky, maybe, you know, and it would be silly of me to say, well, we're going to go in this direction because I know everything. And then you get 60% there, and then you're missing the rest of that percentage that could be filled in with other talent. Right.
That just blew somebody's mind right there, what you just said.
Yeah.
They're like,
Wow.
he knows 60%, that much is what probably people are thinking. No, but it's, you know, no, some of the best moments that I can think of, you know, in my professional career over the past couple of years is, you know, someone kind of standing behind me all quiet, like, you know, as I'm doing some whiteboarding or whatever have you. And they just kind of like cock their head a little bit and they're like, what's that? And then I'll explain. And they say, well, why are you doing it like that? And I'll explain. And then they're like, well, why don't you do it this way instead? And I'm like, oh, because I didn't think of that at all. That's a great idea. That's so much better than my idea. Oh my gosh, you know. And then that's how you make better products. It's how you make better services. So, so yeah, I enjoy the you know, kind of sitting down with people and just listening to like what they're trying to accomplish, and then saying, and just going very high level initially and saying, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Because you're telling me that you know, for me at least, you know, they'll sit down with me for coffee and say, I want to build an app, you know, or whatever have you. And then I'm like, why do you need an app for that? I mean, is that really the solution to what you're trying to do? Or are you building an app because you want to build an app because it's cool? You know, is that really the best possible thing that you can do with not a whole lot of money?
Mhm.
You know, but like let's figure out the best approach at getting you started on making money. And maybe it's not building an app for some amount of money. Maybe it's doing this instead. So
Yeah.
those are the kind of conversations I tend to have.
I do a lot of help in like hospitality and restaurants. And when people come to me, like my first meeting is to help them, try to convince them not to open a restaurant. And then the second meeting is like, okay, well, if we're doing this, let's do it. Now, Ryan, you had a really great post along a bit of writing about the CEO and founder of Zappos.com, specifically being like candid and open about the darkest part of what we're talking about. Can you explain a little bit about like what that, like knowing his experience, maybe even knowing him, like what that meant to you and helps push you forward?
Yeah, that's it's interesting. I think I go to I very deliberately now when I write or when I speak publicly, I still have the urge to like package everything up and make it, palatable and look sweet, to crush it. But I go out my way to not now, to just sort of be real about stuff. And when I published that post about Tony Hsieh, I remember thinking like, should I publish this? This is like scary to even talk about. But the story, like it struck me because I saw Tony speak once in person. I don't know him, but I saw him speak once at the Econ Club, I think. And he struck me both then and in general, just what I knew about him and his book and his work and all this, as like the pinnacle of conscious capitalism, the pinnacle of what's possible if you put people first, if you really focus on mission as the prime directive, like just how much financial success and everything else can come from that as being the point. So I really put him up on like, yeah, this is what we all should aspire to as it relates to business. And it's a tragedy that he died, and then to find out the sort of the backstory of what was going on in his life when he died was, I mean, it shook me, because he was running, as I understand it, he was, feeling the same sense of like, I don't know what he's feeling, but what I felt when I heard about the story was a real recollection of, feeling like I have accomplished everything that I can possibly think of to accomplish, and it feels empty, and it feels like it doesn't matter, and it feels like I've wasted all of this time trying to accomplish stuff. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's just you feel lonely and almost like duped by how well you thought you were doing. And again, I'm projecting with his story because his story, of course, is very different than mine. But I had my own experience with drugs and alcohol when I was younger. I've been sober now for about 14 years, but I went through a 4-year period of college where, I mean, I was Jim Morrison. Like I was just trying to break through the other side, no matter what that meant. And a lot of that was driven from this sense of, loneliness and sort of a lack of hope, or just this really bleak place that I was in. So I think when I heard about Tony and it really sunk in, it hit two nerves. One, a real like foundational one for me, which is, drugs and alcohol and how that can really be something that can lead you to a dark place, as it did for me. And then also the broader addiction that we all have to just winning. And like, we're all, Tony not accepted. I think to some extent it's the water that we're all swimming in. We're all trying to win at so hard at whatever it is that we're doing. And you look at somebody like Tony and it drives it home for me that it's just the wrong game. Because we know what it looks like once you've won. And it looks like people that, I don't know how many people we need to see at the very top of their industry commit suicide to really realize that maybe that's not what we should be aiming for.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any last questions for Ryan before we wrap this up? I know we're at the hour.
Thank you for sharing that part of your story, Ryan. I am on a 21-day challenge right now, and although I don't feel like I was in the point of undeniable addiction, I do know that when you work really hard, it's easy to make an excuse at the end of the day of, oh, great, I can have a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine and go into, take my bath and be fine. And before you know it, what you're trying to do is shut down your brain, right? When you're a creative and you're an entrepreneur and you're running a company, there's always something that you can be doing. And so that quest to be present and just stop, sometimes we replace with that need to have a drink or do a drug or something else. So thank you for sharing that part of your story. I got to say, the last 21 days, the clarity that has come from not having alcohol in my system and the intentionality of waking up now and actually following through with that meditation. It's easy to say we were doing it, but actually doing it has helped tremendously in just mindset and moving forward. So I just want to say thank you for sharing that part of your story. I think that we could go so many ways with today's conversation because there's so much of a dark side of building something, right? Like there's so many things, there's so much stuff. This could be a part 2, a part 3, a part 4. I mean, really. But I just want to say thank you in summary, Ryan, for being vulnerable today and to sharing your time with us.
It was my pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me. It was great.
Anything, Sloth? No? Yeah.
No, that last bit it's going to haunt me, Ryan. I'm going to be thinking about that quite a lot. I mean, but I think it just kind of reinforces this refrain that I'm hearing. And that's that, at the end of the day, earlier you made this really interesting point that we build in our minds the idea that there's this business and it's its own thing. And we almost assume its identity. But at the end of the day, these businesses are being built by people. And people can sometimes have problems and people, are imperfect. And that's just a fact. And so as you mentioned, like trying to run away from that concept. And, if anything, I would say that over the past couple of years, I think we've seen just as a nation, the dark side of American idealism and, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and rugged individualism, all that good stuff. I mean, we're seeing kind of like what sometimes happens when you're, I'm an island unto myself. I will be, all that stuff. And then we lose sense of our community. We lose sense that we are surrounded by talent, that you're a team and you create things as a team. So no, this is all really good stuff. Thanks again, for sure.
And Sloth, I want to say thank you again. In dreams, you have been a person that has always been there for others, including myself. Even at times where I didn't believe in myself, you were a person who always steps up to the place and says your idea. So I just want to say, get a little emotional, but I've never said this to you, and I feel like now is the proper place to do it. Thank you. Thank you for being there, and thank you for all that you continue to do. And we're going to continue to work together on those dreams. So thank you.
Thanks. It's been a year, you guys. I mean, it's very and Corey brought this up, I think, at the beginning of this conversation, in a post-COVID world, it's very easy to feel extremely isolated, even while we're all together, we're not really truly together. Right. And most of the people who are on this Zoom conference right now, we're all like so shy. And so it's, when you don't have your people, it can get tough. So I miss my professional family.
We
so
love
it's really great seeing you guys.
On that note, that's a good place to stop, I guess, is for anyone who is looking to get plugged in and looking for any kind of community, you can always reach out to Startup Grind. Anybody in the organization lives by those values, and especially I don't care where you are on the planet. Corey at startupgrind.com. You can find me anywhere on social. Corey the Heart. That's my handle anywhere. And then Ryan, how do founders find you?
Yeah. So Inside Out is at leadinsideout.io. So that's the agency's website. And then I also produce, along with a couple other guest folks, sometimes a newsletter on a weekly basis about conscious startup leadership, which is at secondmountainstartup.com.
Awesome. Truly grateful for the generosity of your time. It's been really great to get to know you outside of this as well, and excited to have you in our local community. I spent a lot of time outside of GR, so this is like really great. So yeah, I'll let everyone get back to their day. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks. All.
Thank you. Bye, guys.